Alright, welcome to the vlog. Today we will be discussing Dancing on the Edge of the World by Ursula Guin. I have this copy from the library that, my friends, needs to be rebound. I really want my own copy of this book, which leads to the next segment, that there's kind of 4 the Guin books of essays that I want to read to incorporate. Only 2 of them are on my reading list for this course, but I'm gonna, continue this reading a book every 2 weeks for school thing, I think, into next semester, because it's doing me some good and I found more books that I want to read, which is a great thing, I think. But Dancing on the Edge of the World is one of them, and then I went and bought these 2 books. I am counting them not towards fun buying books, but towards school books to use for school, and once I get my grant money, I'll be like, oh, I used my grant money to pay for this retroactively. Logic. So this is the other one that's on my list, which is Why Words Matter, more of a recent one, or Words Are My Matter. I'm so sorry. Sorry for misquoting. And then we have The Language of the Night, which is about science fiction and fantasy. And then the other one is Cheek by Jowl. That one's a lot harder to find. I do have my library copy up there, but it just hasn't been reprinted recently, so it's much more difficult. And I did buy these from a local bookstore, thank you very much. I'm really trying not to use Amazon or the other bookstore that shall not be named. I haven't shopped there in forever. But yes, Dancing on the Edge of the World. I still am going to read some more today, but so far Ursula K. Le Guin's the smartest person that's ever lived, and it kind of makes me nervous because I'll never be as smart as her, even no matter how hard I try. She just talks about things, and then I was almost crying while reading this book because she's just that smart and that good at writing. This book also features, half of it is reviews of other books. That's cool. Always interested to hear people's thoughts. And the articles I read this week, I read an article, not a book, about the origins of science fiction paperbacks. Now this article is fascinating. It kind of had me glued to my seat, which is how I know maybe I'm studying the right thing, because it was about the first paperback book to have the word science fiction on it, edited by this guy who started his own imprint, but his kind of origins in pulp science fiction magazines, which is kind of the genre originator, and how these 2 editors of these 2 major magazines really shaped science fiction at the beginning. And what was fascinating to me was how both of these men, one of them was really science focused, he thought, oh, science fiction is for scientists, it's to encourage young scientists and should be scientifically sound, and the other guy was it should be philosophically and literature driven. And they had this really big impact on the stories that were accepted in the magazines. But the other guy who this article is about, I forget his full name. His initials are DAW, D-A-W, and that was his imprint, his publishing imprint that he created. It's not an imprint technically. I don't know the difference. Regardless, he couldn't get any of his stories published because they were not scientifically sound enough and they were too socially conscious. So he created this cult called the Futurians, who wrote and edited science fiction together in the 1930s in New York, crazy times, take me back. And this article, of course, about the origins of science fiction barely talks about women, which I was there's interesting stuff here about women, and it's kind of glossed over. It's he started this cult, and then the only cult members, it wasn't actually a cult, it was like a society, but it gave incredibly cult vibes. Like, they lived together and had like meetings, and then they excommunicated people. Like, okay, it just randomly mentions, the guy's like, oh yeah, his wife is also a part of it, but all the other members mentioned were men doing men things. And I was like, wow, what an interesting thing would be to research the female members if there were any other than his wife. And then later in the article, it talks about how this guy was actually edited and published Joanna Russ. I've talked about her before, despite still not having read any of her books, but Joanna Russ, and starting other women, because he saw women as like a part of science fiction. But I'm like, you didn't talk about that at all, and how that contributes to the fact that these two publishers that I talked about at the beginning, who really controlled it, were very adamant that their audience for science fiction was not young people and women. Like, they were like, to the point of like delusion, because obviously their audience wasn't actually like young scientists and intelligent, full pipe smoking, I don't know. Sometimes I just talk. But anyways, they were like very adamant. They were like, our stuff is not for children or for women. But like, it was, because that was the biggest demographic of people to this day who read science fiction and fantasy. So the disconnect from the very beginning of the genre, there's something there. The other article I read, I'm lying, by the way, I read this article about 6 months ago, and then I put it on the reading list like I was going to read it when I already had. It's called Thinking Ahead. Was on the origin of genre fiction, and which was cool because it's a recent article I published last year by a Canadian, and he was like, no one's ever actually written a concrete like article about this very topic. So I was like, which you would think the origins of genre fiction would have been written about before, but that one was very good, a lot about like the transition from like pulp to paperbacks, etc. And it got me thinking about how book genres and music genres, which are not really comparable. You would think that there would be a similarity in origins, but they're kind of like two different systems that originated them. And they were both for marketing purposes. Like, genre is ultimately a product of marketing. But I took a music course in first year of university, by the way, which is why I know this, and it was also the best. One of the only 3 courses I took in my entire career in undergraduate that I actually liked. Famously, I hate everything. So this course was amazing because the prof was amazing. It was just fun, and it was really fascinating because you learn that like music genre is almost entirely a category constructed from race. Like, all music genre comes from origins of race, and specifically, you know, black and white relations in the US. That's where all like music genres come from. And that's like not the case with book genres at all. It's more of a like subtle marketing thing. It's not as overtly like about race and gender, I would say in my personal opinion, and my professional opinion, you know what, fuck that, my professional opinion, it's not the same. Anyways, that was just my train of thought. I have to go read this book, and I'm going to make a nice sandwich for dinner. Thank you for watching.